Hey guys, tonight we drift into the vibrant, treacherous world of Aztec gardens, where floating islands of mud and reeds cradle crops in the heart of a shimmering lake. Picture yourself gliding on a canoe, the air thick with the scent of wet earth, blooming marigolds, and the faint tang of fish darting beneath the surface. The sun glints off Lake Texcoco, its waters a mirror, reflecting the sprawl of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, in all its chaotic glory. Temples pierce the sky like stone daggers, and the chatter of merchants echoes across the canals. These chinampas, as the Aztecs called their man-made garden islands, were miracles of ingenuity, feeding an empire in a place where solid ground was a rare commodity. But don't get too cozy. You probably wouldn't survive a day tending them. The mosquitoes alone would turn your skin into a pincushion before lunch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you listening from tonight? Drop your city and local time in the comments. I'm curious to know who's floating along with us. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Tenochtitlan, around 1480, paddling through a labyrinth of canals that weave through the city like veins. The water laps gently against your canoe, a flat-bottomed vessel carved from a single log, its wood slick with algae. Around you, the chinampas stretch in neat rows, green patches stitched together with reeds and sheer determination. These aren't just gardens, they're the lifeblood of an empire, feeding tens of thousands in a city that's more water than land. Historians estimate that chinampas could produce up to 4 harvests a year, a staggering feat that kept Tenochtitlan's markets brimming with maize, beans, and squash. Without them, the city would have starved, its temples crumbling into the lake. You watch farmers knee-deep in mud, their hands calloused from weaving reed mats that anchor these floating plots. It's mesmerizing, but the work is brutal. Imagine balancing on a soggy raft of dirt, praying it doesn't sink under your weight. One misstep, and you're floundering in the murky water, hoping no eels mistake your toes for lunch. The Aztecs didn't conjure chinampas from thin air. They built on the knowledge of earlier Mesoamerican cultures, like the people of Xochimilco, who learned to tame the swampy lake into farmland centuries before. You'd think it's simple pile mud, plant seeds, grow food. But Lake Texcoco was a fickle beast. Too much rain, and your chinampa could dissolve, washing your crops into the depths. Too little, and the sun baked your fields into cracked, barren clay. Scholars still argue whether chinampas were truly sustainable, or if the Aztecs pushed the lake's ecosystem to the brink, risking collapse even before the Spanish showed up with their swords and smallpox. You're out here, sweat stinging your eyes, hauling mud to shore up the edges of your plot. The air hums with mosquitoes, and your back aches from bending over reeds. Oh, and here's a quirky tidbit. Some chinampas were so sturdy, families lived on them, their homes perched atop the muddy beds. Imagine drifting off to sleep, with maize stalks rustling overhead, the lake whispering beneath you, and wondering if a snake's slithering through your crops. Not exactly a restful night, is it? As you paddle, the sheer variety of plants catches your eye. Maize stalks tower like sentinels, their golden tassels swaying in the breeze. Squash vines sprawl, their broad leaves casting shade over the soil. Chili pepper d'angle, fiery red, daring you to test their heat. These gardens weren't just for food, they were a pharmacy, a temple, a market stall all rolled into one. You spot a farmer offering a marigold to Xochipilli, the god of flowers, his lips moving in a quiet prayer for a bountiful harvest. It's a blend of practicality and spirituality, a balance the Aztecs wove into every aspect of life. But don't let the beauty fool you. That farmer's got a limp from a leech bite. And the water around you hides more than fish. Crocodiles lurk in the shallows. And the reeds are home to snakes. That'd make your skin crawl. You're starting to see why these gardens were a dangerous paradise, lush and life-giving, but ready to bite back at any moment. The Chinampas were a marvel, but they came with a cost. Building one was no small feat. You'd start by driving wooden stakes into the lake bed, then weaving reeds into mats to form a base. Next came layers of mud and silt, dredged from the lake's bottom, piled high until the plot could support crops. It sounds straightforward, but the labor was relentless. You're out here, thigh-deep in water, hauling baskets of mud under a sun mage. Your arms burn. Your feet slip on the slimy lake bed. And every so often, a fish brush your leg, making you jump. The Aztecs used no wheels or beasts of burden, just human muscle and ingenuity. A single Chinampa could take weeks to build, and a bad storm could undo it all in hours. You marvel at the precision each plot, about 100 feet long and 10 feet wide, was laid out with almost geometric accuracy, a testament to the Aztecs' engineering prowess. But precision didn't make the work any less grueling. Your hands blister from twisting reeds, and the heat makes your head swim. You can't help but wonder if the gods appreciated the effort, or if they just enjoyed watching you struggle. The farmers you see aren't just growing food, they're defying nature itself. Lake Texcoco was brackish, a mix of fresh and salt water, which made farming a gamble. The Aztecs learned to manage this by channeling fresh water from springs and rivers, a system so sophisticated it rivaled anything in the old world. You paddle past a canal where workers are clearing debris, their faces etched with exhaustion. They're not just keeping the water flowing, they're keeping the city alive. Without these canals, the Chinampas would dry out, and Tenochtitlan would starve. You notice the farmers' clothing, simple loincloths and cloaks of Maggie fiber, rough against their sunburned skin. They work in silence, but you catch snippets of Nahuatl, their language, as they call to each other. It's a reminder that this is a community, bound by shared labor and shared risk. You try to imagine their lives rising before dawn, tending crops, praying for rain, but not too much. It's a delicate dance, and one wrong step could mean disaster. The Chinampas weren't just practical, they were sacred. You see a small altar on one plot, adorned with flowers and a clay figurine of Tlaloc, the rain god. The Aztecs believed their crops depended on divine favor, and they weren't shy about offering gifts to keep the gods happy. Sometimes it was flowers or maize, other times it was something darker. You shudder at the thought, but human sacrifice was part of this world. A grim bargain to ensure the sun rose and the rains came. Historians debate how often these rituals happened on Chinampas. Some say they were rare, others argue they were routine. Either way, the stakes were high. A bad harvest wasn't just a personal failure, it was a sign the gods were displeased. You paddle past a farmer scattering seeds, his movements precise, almost reverent. He's not just planting, he's pleading with the divine for mercy. You can't help but feel the weight of it all, the beauty, the danger, the endless cycle of hope and fear. As you glide through the canals, do you notice the wildlife? Birds swoop low, their wings skimming the water, frogs croak from the reeds, and fish dart beneath your canoe. It's a thriving ecosystem, but it's not all friendly. You spot a ripple in the water, a crocodile, maybe, or just a trick of the light. The farmers don't seem fazed, but you're gripping your paddle a little tighter. The Chinampas were a haven for life, but they were also a battleground. Insects buzz in clouds, drawn to the damp earth. Some, like bees, were useful. Others, like mosquitoes, carried diseases that could fell a healthy worker in days. You swat at one buzzing near your ear, wondering how the Aztecs coped without bug spray. They used herbs. You learn crushed marigolds or burnt sage to keep the pests at bay. It worked. Sometimes, but not always. Life here was a constant negotiation with nature, and nature didn't always play fair. You pause to rest, your canoe bobbing gently. The sun is high now, baking the back of your neck. You squint at the horizon, where Tenochtitlan's Great Pyramid looms, its stone steps gleaming. It's a reminder of the empire's power, built on the sweat of people like the ones you see around you. The Chinampas were more than gardens. They were a symbol of Aztec ambition, proof that humans could bend even a lake to their will. But that ambition came with a price. You think of the farmers, their lives tied to the rhythm of the seasons, their fates in the hands of gods and weather. You're starting to understand why these gardens were called a dangerous paradise. They fed a nation, but they demanded everything: your strength, your faith, your survival. And yet, as you paddle on, you can't help but admire the sheer tenacity of it all. These people built an empire on mud, and somehow, it worked. Section 2. You're still gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the sun climbing higher, casting sharp shadows across the Chinampas, T's floating gardens, miracles of mud and reeds. There are more than just patches of green. They're engineering triumphs that kept an empire fed. You're about to see how the Aztecs pulled off this feat, turning a brackish lake into a breadbasket. Your canoe rocks gently as you paddle closer to a group of workers, their hands caked with silt, weaving reeds and piling mud. It's back-breaking work, and the heat's no joke. Your forehead's already slick with sweat. You can't help but wonder how they managed without modern tools or a quick run to the hardware store. Spoiler, it was all grit, ingenuity, and a lot of muscle. Let's dive into the mechanics of Chinampas. But don't expect a breezy TED Talk. This is slow, sweaty history, perfect for drifting off. Building a Chinampa was like crafting a giant, muddy lasagna. You start with wooden stakes, driven deep into the lake bed to anchor the plot. These aren't fancy lumberyard beams, just branches or logs, hacked down with obsidian axes and hauled through the water. You watch a worker, his arms corded with muscle, hammer a stake with a stone mallet. Each thud echoes across the canal, and you wince, imagining the blisters forming on his palms. Once the stakes are set, you weave reeds into mats, like giant wicker baskets, to form the base. These mats are key. They hold the mud together and keep the whole thing from sinking. You try to picture yourself weaving, your fingers raw from twisting tough, fibrous reeds. It's not exactly meditative. One wrong move, and you're slicing your hand open on a sharp edge. The Aztecs used maguey and willow, plants tough enough to withstand the lake's constant pull. Quirky tidbit: some workers chewed Maggi sap to stay hydrated, like a primitive energy drink, though it probably tasted like bitter regret. Next comes the mud. You're wading in the shallows now, scooping silt from the lake bed with a wooden scoop. It's heavy, slimy work, and the water's cold against your legs. You pile the muck onto the reed mats, layer after layer, until the plot rises above the surface. The mud's rich with nutrients, carried down from rivers and springs, making it perfect for crops. But it's not just mud decaying plants. Fish bones, even human waste get mixed in. Yep, you heard that right. The Aztecs weren't shy about using what we'd politely call organic matter as fertilizer. You grimace, imagining the smell. But it worked. Chinampas were insanely fertile, yielding harvests that fed Tenochtitlan's 200. Zero souls. Historians estimate these gardens covered up to 0 acres. A patchwork of green that kept the empire humming. Without them, the city's markets would have been ghost towns, and the priests would have had no maize to offer the gods. The engineering wasn't just about piling dirt. You notice the canals between chinampas, dug with precision to control water flow. These channels weren't random. They doubled as irrigation systems and highways for canoes. You paddle through one, barely wide enough for 2 boats to pass. Workers are dredging, hauling up muck to keep the canals clear. It's endless maintenance. Silt builds up, reeds rot, and storms can tear plots apart. You spot a man reinforcing his chinampa's edges with more stakes, his face grim as he battles erosion. The Aztecs had to think like engineers, balancing water levels and soil stability. Too much water, and the chinampa floods. Too little, and it dries out. Scholars still debate how the Aztecs managed fresh water in a brackish lake. Some say they tapped springs. Others argue they built aqueducts. Either way, you're impressed. This wasn't just farming, it was defying nature itself. But nature fought back. You're starting to feel the sun's heat. Relentless, even through your imaginary straw hat. The lake was a living thing. Unpredictable and moody. Storms could whip up waves, washing away weeks of work. Earthquakes, common in this volcanic region, could shake chinampas apart. You hear a distant rumble and tense, but it's just thunder still. It's a reminder of how precarious this life was. The Aztecs built dikes and sluice gates to control flooding, but these were no match for a bad season. You paddle past a chinampa that's half submerged. Its crops wilting, the farmers nowhere in sight, probably praying to Tlaloc for mercy. You can't blame him. The gods were as much a part of this as the mud every stake driven. Every seed planted was an offering to keep the divine happy. Fail, and you risked more than a bad harvest. You risked divine wrath. The chinampas weren't just functional, they were beautiful. You glide past one bursting with colour, golden maize, red chilies, purple amaranth. Flowers like marigolds and dahlias grow along the edges, not just for show but for the gods. Exochipili, the flower prince, got his share of blooms, and you see a small clay idol tucked among the stalks, surrounded by petals. It's serene. But don't get too relaxed. The lake's full of surprises, like the water snakes slithering through the reeds. You spot one, its scales glinting, and steer clear. The farmers don't flinch. They're used to it, but you're not. And then there's the bugs. Mosquitos swarm, drawn to the damp, and you're swatting them like a one-man pest control team. The Aztecs burned herbs to keep them at bay, but it was a losing battle. Malaria wasn't a word they knew, but they felt its fever all the same. You pause to watch a group of workers, their movements synchronized as they pile mud. They're young, some barely teens, their faces set with focus. The Aztecs didn't mess around. Everyone worked, from kids to elders. You try to imagine their lives up at dawn, tending crops, repairing chinampas, maybe sneaking a moment to laugh or share a story. They're not slaves, but they're not free either. Taxes, paid in crops, keep them tethered to the state. You hear a low chant, a work song to keep rhythm, and it's oddly soothing, like a lullaby for laborers. These people built an empire on water, and you're starting to see how it's not just engineering, it's endurance. You paddle on, the canal narrowing, the chinampas closing in. The air smells of earth and water, and you're struck by the paradox. This place is a marvel, But it's also a grind. Every stalk of maize is a victory. Every chinampa, a defiance of the lake's chaos. The scale of it all hits you. Tenochtitlan wasn't just a city, it was a machine. And the chinampas were its engine. You think of the markets, overflowing with produce from these plots. Merchants in canoes, loaded with beans and squash, navigate these same canals to Tlatelolco, the great marketplace. You'll get there later. But for now, you're here, surrounded by green. The chinampas are a testament to human will, but they're also a reminder of its limits. You can't control the rain, the quakes, or the gods. You can only build, plant, and pray. The workers around you know this. Their hands moving with practiced ease. They're not just farmers, they're architects of survival. You dip your paddle, the water cool against your hands, and feel a strange respect for these people. They made paradise out of mud. But paradise came with a price. Section 3. You're gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan. The sun now, a fierce orb overhead, baking the chinampas around you. These floating gardens are a marvel. But they're not just pretty patches of green. They're the stomach of an empire, churning out the crops that keep the Aztec capital alive. You're about to get your hands dirty, harvesting maize and amaranth, the staples that fed thousands. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and crushed leaves, and your canoe sways as you pull alongside a chinampa bursting with golden stalks. The farmers here don't pause to chat. They're bent over, slicing cobs with obsidian blades. Their movements quick but careful. You're starting to see why these crops were life itself. Miss a harvest, and the city starves. Let's settle in and explore the plants that powered an empire. But don't expect a picnic. This is sweaty, sticky work, and the bugs are already eyeing you like a buffet. Maize is king here. You reach out, brushing a stalk, its rough leaves scratching your palm. The cobs are heavy, wrapped in husks like green armor, and you watch a farmer peel one back to reveal golden kernels. Maize was more than food, it was currency. Offering, lifeline. Historians say it made up 70% of the Aztec diet, ground into tortillas or boiled into atole, a porridge that fueled everyone from warriors to priests. You try your hand at harvesting, twisting a cob free. It's heavier than it looks, and your wrist aches from the effort. The Aztecs grew dozens of varieties, white, yellow, even blue, each suited to the Chinampa's muddy beds. You spot a farmer inspecting his crop, muttering a prayer to Sentiotl, the maize god. Every kernel was a gift from the divine, and wasting it was practically a sin. You're careful not to drop yours, but the mud underfoot is slippery, and you nearly topple into the canal. Graceful. Right, Amaranth is the other star of the show. You see its feathery red heads bobbing above the soil, like tiny torches. It's a tough plant, thriving where others wilt, and the Aztecs loved it for its versatility. You watch a woman grind the tiny seeds into flour, her hands moving in a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. Amaranth was a staple for tamales and ceremonial cakes. But here's a quirky tidbit. It was also sacred. Priests shaped it into dough figures of gods, which were eaten during rituals. Imagine biting into a deity, talk about a divine snack. You try grinding some yourself. The stone metate grinding against your palms. It's slow work, and your arms are screaming after a minute. The Aztecs did this for hours, day after day, to keep the city fed. You're starting to respect the sheer stamina it took to live here. Beans and squash round out the Chinampa's bounty. You spot rows of climbing bean vines, their pods dangling like green jewels. Squash sprawls across the plot, its broad leaves shielding the soil from the sun. These crops were grown together in a system called The Three Sisters. A genius combo, where maize supports bean vines. Squash shades the soil, and beans enrich it with nitrogen. You're impressed. Modern farmers still use this trick. You try picking a squash. Its prickly stem jabbing your fingers. The farmers don't flinch. They're used to it. These crops weren't just food. They were survival. A single chinampa could yield enough to feed a family for months. But taxes to the state took a hefty cut. You hear a farmer grumble about the tribute collectors, who'd swoop in like hawks to claim their share. Nobody likes tax season. But here, it could mean going hungry. The chinampas weren't just about quantity, they were about diversity. You paddle past plots, growing chilies, tomatoes, and herbs like epazote, its sharp scent cutting through the humid air. Chilies were a big deal. The Aztecs had 100 varieties. From mild to mouth-melting. You imagine biting into one by mistake and spending the next hour chugging water. The farmers used them to spice food and ward off pests. But they also believed chilies had magical properties. A quick rub on a sore joint, and maybe the pain eased, or maybe you just forgot about it while your skin burned. You see a kid sneak a chili and immediately regret it, his eyes watering as his mother laughs. It's a rare light moment in a life of endless toil, and you can't help but smile. These people found joy where they could, even if it came with a side of spice. But it wasn't all bountiful harvests. The lake was a harsh mistress. You notice a chinampa with wilting maize. Its leaves yellowed from too much salt in the water. The brackish lake could turn on you, poisoning crops if the freshwater channels clogged. You paddle past a worker clearing a canal, his face etched with worry. A bad season could mean famine, and famine meant rebellion or worse. The gods' anger. Scholars debate whether the Aztecs' intensive farming pushed the lake's ecosystem to its limits. Some say they were on the brink of collapse by the time Cortés arrived. Others argue the chinampas could have fed the city for centuries. You don't know who's right, but you feel the weight of it. Every cob you harvest is a gamble against drought, flood, or divine displeasure. You tuck the maize under your arm, hoping it's enough to keep the gods happy. Pests were another headache. You swatted a cloud of insects, their wings buzzing like a bad soundtrack. Locusts could strip a chinampa bare in hours, leaving nothing but stubble. You hear stories of swarms so thick they blocked the sun. A biblical nightmare that left farmers praying to Tlaloc for relief. Smellopists, like beetles and worms, were a constant nuisance. You see a farmer scattering ash over his crops. A trick to deter bugs. It's not foolproof, but it's better than nothing. Disease was just as bad. Blight could wipe out a plot overnight. You spot a farmer pulling up sickly plants, his face grim. He's not just losing crops, he's losing months of work. Maybe his family's food for the winter. You feel a pang of sympathy. But there's no time to dwell. The next chinampa needs tending, and the sun's not slowing down. The farmers' lives were tied to these crops. You watch a family work together, parents teaching kids how to spot ripe cobs or pull weeds without damaging roots. It's a team effort, but it's grueling. Kids, as young as 5, were out here, hauling water or chasing off birds. You try to imagine your own childhood, swapping toys for a hoe. The thought makes you grateful for modern comforts, like air conditioning and bug spray. These families lived on the edge, one bad harvest away from starvation, yet they kept going, season after season, their lives woven into the rhythm of planting and reaping. You paddle past a chinampa where a woman sings softly, her voice carrying over the water. It's a work song, steady and soothing, and you feel your eyelids grow heavy. The chinampas fed an empire, but they also fed hope. Hope that tomorrow's harvest would be better, that the gods would smile. that the lake wouldn't swallow their work whole. Section 4. You're still drifting through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the chinampas glowing green under the midday sun. The scent of wet earth and spicy chilies fills the air. But there's something else, something heavier, almost electric. These floating gardens aren't just about maize and beans, they're sacred spaces, pulsing with divine energy. You're about to encounter the plants that the Aztecs revered as gifts from the gods. Plants that held spiritual power, but came with risks that could make your skin crawl. Your canoe glides closer to a chinampa, dotted with vibrant flowers and strange, spiky growths. The farmers here move with a reverence you haven't seen before, their hands gentle as they tend these sacred crops. This isn't just farming, it's worship. And one wrong move could anger the divine. Let's ease into the world of Aztec sacred plants. But don't expect a peaceful herb garden. This is a dangerous paradise, where beauty hides a sharp edge. Marigolds catch your eye first, their golden petals blazing like tiny suns. Known as cempasúchil, these flowers weren't just pretty, they were sacred to the Aztecs, linked to the dead and the divine. You watch a farmer place a marigold on a small clay altar, muttering a prayer to Xochipilli, the god of flowers and pleasure. These blooms were used in rituals, their scent believed to guide souls during the Day of the Dead. You lean closer, inhaling their peppery fragrance, and feel a shiver. Legend said they could connect the living to the afterlife. Quirky tidbit, the Aztecs sometimes ate marigolds in stews, believing they carried divine blessings. You imagine the taste, floral and bitter, and decide you'd stick to maize. But these flowers weren't harmless. Farmers had to time their planting perfectly, too early, and frost could kill them, too late. And they'd miss the festivals. A failed offering meant risking the gods' wrath. And nobody wanted to tempt fate in a world where divine anger meant drought or worse. Then there's the magi plant, its spiky leaves jutting like daggers from the chinampa's edge. You steer your canoe clear, wary of those needle-sharp tips. Magi was a workhorse, its fibers wove ropes. Its sap fermented into pulque, a milky drink sacred to the gods. You see a farmer slicing a maguey leaf, his hands deft to avoid the spines. Pulque was no ordinary booze. It was reserved for priests and nobles during ceremonies, believed to channel divine visions. But it came with a catch. Drink too much, and you'd be staggering, risking a public whipping for drunkenness. You chuckle at the thought of a priest stumbling through a ritual, but the farmers don't laugh. Magi sap could ferment too fast in the heat, turning toxic. One bad batch, and you're not just drunk, you're dead. Historians estimate pulque-related poisonings were rare, but real. A reminder that even sacred plants could bite back. Cacao is another divine gift, its pods glinting red and yellow among the greenery. You watch a woman crack one open, revealing beans that smell faintly of chocolate. Cacao was currency and sacred drink, mixed with chilies and water into a frothy brew for nobles. You're tempted to try it, but it's not your modern hot cocoa. Think spicy, bitter, and served cold. The Aztecs believed cacao fueled the soul, offering it to gods like Quetzalcoatl. But growing it on chinampas was tricky. You notice the farmer shading the cacao plants with palm fronds, too much sun, and they'd wither. Pests loved them too. Ants and beetles could ruin a crop overnight. You swat a bug from your arm, feeling the farmer's frustration. Scholars debate whether cacao was a chinampa staple or a luxury import. Some say the Aztecs grew it locally. Others argue it came from distant groves. Either way, you're impressed by the effort. Every pod was a treasure, guarded like gold. Tobacco plants sway nearby, their leaves broad and slightly sticky. You see a farmer drying them in the sun, preparing them for rituals. Tobacco was sacred, smoked or chewed by priests to commune with the gods. You imagine the buzz, sharp and dizzying, and wonder how they stayed focused during those visions. But tobacco wasn't all spiritual highs. Handling it left farmers with rashes, and inhaling too much smoke could make you sick. You spot a worker rubbing his eyes, irritated by the leaves' dust. The Aztecs didn't know about nicotine poisoning, but they felt its effects: headaches, nausea, even fainting. You're glad you're just paddling, not harvesting. The spiritual weight of these plants was heavy. A bad tobacco crop could mean a failed ritual, and a failed ritual could spell disaster. You feel the pressure, even from your canoe, as the farmers work with care, knowing the gods are watching. The sacred plants weren't just about beauty or visions, they were tied to the Aztecs' obsession with balance. You paddle past a chinampa, where a priest sprinkles maize kernels into the soil, chanting to Sentiotl. Every plant had a purpose, a divine role, but also a risk. Take datura, a plant with trumpet-shaped flowers that gleam white in the dusk. You see it growing at the plot's edge, its beauty almost eerie. Datura was a hallucinogen, used by shamans to enter trances, but it was deadly in the wrong dose. One sip too many, and you're not seeing visions, you're seeing the afterlife. You shudder, steering clear. The Aztecs knew its power, using it sparingly. But accidents happened. A farmer might brush against it, get sap on his skin, and spend the night delirious. You're starting to see why these gardens were dangerous, not just for snakes or floods, but for the plants themselves. Sacred, yet sinister. The spiritual stakes were high. You watch a farmer offer a cactus fruit to a small idol of Tlaloc, the rain god. The Aztecs believed every plant was a gift. But gifts came with strings. A poor harvest wasn't just bad luck. It was a sign you'd angered the divine. You feel the weight of it, paddling through the canals. The farmer's prayers, a low hum in the air. Historians still argue whether these rituals were practical ways to unify the community, or if the Aztecs truly believed they controlled the weather. You lean toward the latter, the altars, the offerings, the careful tending of sacred plants all point to a deep faith. You pose, watching a butterfly land on a marigold. Its wings, a flicker of color. It's peaceful. But you know better. These gardens were a battlefield, where farmers fought nature and the gods for survival. The Chinampa's sacred role made them more than farmland. They were temples on water. You see a small ceremony unfolding. A farmer burns copal incense, its smoke curling over the water. He's honoring Chalchiutlikyu, the goddess of lakes and streams, who ruled these canals. You're struck by the beauty, the flowers, the chants, the shimmering water, but also the danger. A misplaced offering, a sickly plant, and you could tip the cosmic balance. The Aztecs believed the world could end if the gods weren't appeased. And these gardens were ground zero for that bargain. You paddle past a chinampa where a child places a marigold on an altar, her small hands trembling. She's learning early that this work isn't just about food, it's about keeping the universe spinning. You feel a pang, imagining her fear of failure. So young, yet carrying such weight. The farmers' lives were woven with these plants. You watch a family tend a Maggie, the parents teaching their kids how to cut without getting pricked. It's a team effort, but it's grueling. The sun's relentless, and the air hums with insects. You swat a mosquito, wondering how they coped without modern repellents. They used herbs. Sure, but you're betting it was more hope than science. The sacred plants demanded constant care, too much water. And they rotted, too little. And they died. You see a farmer inspect a cacao pod, his face tense. A bad crop could mean more than hunger. It could mean losing favor with the nobles who expected their chocolate fix. You paddle on, the canal narrowing, the chinampas closing in. The beauty is undeniable, but so is the danger. These plants were divine, but they didn't play nice. Section 5. You're still paddling through the canals of Tenochtitlan. The chinampas, stretching around you like emerald rafts on Lake Texcoco. The sun is a merciless weight on your shoulders, and the air hums with the drone of insects and the splash of paddles. You're about to trade your canoe for a hoe and join the Aztec farmers in their daily grind, working the muddy beds of these floating gardens. This isn't a leisurely stroll through a flower patch, it's a relentless slog, where every seed planted is a bet against hunger and the gods' whims. You pull alongside a chinampa, watching farmers toil, their backs bent, hands caked with silt, their faces are etched with focus, and you can feel the heat radiating from the earth. Let's sink into the sweaty, backbreaking world of Aztec gardening. But don't expect a spa day. This is history at its grittiest, perfect for drifting off as you imagine the ache in your muscles. Your day starts at dawn, the sky still bruised with twilight. You're up before the roosters, splashing cold canal water on your face to shake off sleep. The chinampa is your battlefield, a patch of mud and reeds that feeds your family if you can keep it alive. You grab a wooden hoe, its handle worn smooth by years of use, and wade into the plot. The mud squelches under your bare feet, cool and slick, but it's deceptive. One wrong step, and you're knee-deep in sludge. You start weeding, pulling up intruders that choke your maze. The work is monotonous, your arms moving in a rhythm that's almost hypnotic. Historians estimate farmers spent 10 hours a day on chinampas, tending crops, repairing plots, and hauling water. You're already sweating, and it's barely sunrise. No coffee breaks here, just a sip of pulque if you're lucky, though it's more likely to make you woozy than refreshed. Maize is your main focus. You check the stalks, their tassels swaying like flags. Some are ready to harvest. Others need another week. You slice a cob free with an obsidian blade, its sharp edge glinting. The Aztecs grew maize in tight rows, maximizing every inch of their chinampas. You're careful not to damage the roots. A single plant could mean a week's meals. You move to the beans next, their vines curling up maize stalks like green ribbons. You pick pods, your fingers nimble but aching. Squash sprawls at your feet, its leaves broad as dinner plates. You're juggling 3 crops at once, each with its own needs. It's like running a tiny farm on a raft, and you're the only employee. You chuckle at the thought of a modern farmer's almanac here. Good luck predicting the lake's moods or Tlaloc's temper. The heat is climbing, and you're drenched in sweat. You pause to wipe your brow, glancing at the other farmers. They're a mix of ages, kids barely tall enough to hold a hoe, elders with hands gnarled as tree roots. Everyone works, there's no choice. You see a boy, maybe 10, hauling a basket of mud to shore up the chinampa's edge. He's struggling, but his father nods approval. The Aztecs didn't coddle kids by 5. You were weeding or chasing birds. You try lifting a basket yourself, and it's heavier than it looks. The mud sloshing against your chest. Your back protests, and you're starting to see why so many farmers had hunched spines. Skeletal remains from Aztec sites show arthritis and stress fractures. Proof of lives spent bending under the sun. You're grateful for your imaginary ibuprofen. But these folks had nothing but willpower and maybe a chewed Maggie leaf for pain. Watering is next. You scoop water from the canal with a clay jug, pouring it carefully around the plants. The chinampas rely on the lake, but it's a delicate balance. Too much water, and the roots rot. Too little, and the crops wither. You notice a farmer digging a small channel to divert fresh water from a spring-fed canal. Its clever chinampas were designed to soak up just enough moisture. But the brackish lake could ruin everything if the channels clogged. You help clear one, dragging out slimy reeds and muck. It's filthy work. And something brushes your leg, a fish. You hope. Not a snake. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers kept fish in the canals. Like a built-in protein source. You imagine grilling one, but the thought fades as a mosquito lands on your neck. You swat it, cursing the lack of bug spray. The Aztecs burned sage to keep pests away. But you're betting it was more hope than science. The spiritual side of farming weighs heavy. You pause to place a marigold on a small altar, whispering a prayer to Sentiotl, the maize god. Every task is an offering: planting, weeding, harvesting. The Aztecs believed the gods controlled the harvest, and a bad season meant you'd failed them. You feel the pressure, your hands trembling as you scatter seeds. A priest paddled by, his canoe laden with incense and flowers. He's checking the chinampas, ensuring the gods are honored. You bow your head, opening your plot past muster. Scholars debate how much these rituals drove Aztec agriculture. Some say they unified the community. Others argue they were a desperate bid to control the uncontrollable. You lean toward the latter, the altars, the chants. The constant offerings scream of a people hedging their bets against a fickle universe. Pests are a constant battle. You spot a cloud of locusts on the horizon, and your stomach drops. A swarm could strip your chinampa bare in hours, leaving you with nothing. You grab a bundle of burning herbs, waving it to drive them off. It's a losing fight, but you try anyway. Smaller pests, beetles, worms nibble at your crops daily. You sprinkle ash, a trick passed down for generations. But it's not enough. You see a farmer pull up a sickly maize stalk. His face grim, blights another enemy, spreading fast in the humid air. You're starting to understand why farmers prayed so much. Every day was a gamble, sun, rain, bugs, disease. You're exhausted. And it's not even noon. You sit for a moment, mud smearing your legs, and watch a kid chase a bird from the plot. He's laughing, and it's a rare spark of joy in this grind. You smile, but the ache in your back keeps you grounded. The community keeps you going. You work alongside neighbors, sharing tools and tips. A woman offers you a tortilla, warm from a clay griddle. You take a bite, maize and chilies. Simple, but filling. Meals are communal, eaten on the chinampa between tasks. You hear stories of good harvests, bad storms, and the time a crocodile got too curious. The farmers laugh, but their eyes are wary. The lake's a partner and a predator, giving life, but taking it too. You paddle to the next task, repairing a reed mat that's fraying. It's tedious, weaving the tough fibers until your fingers bleed. The sun's at its peak now, and you're lightheaded. You sip canal water, hoping it's clean. Dysentery was a real risk. Archaeological evidence shows parasitic infections were common. You're grateful for your imaginary immune system. But these farmers had no such luck. Taxes loom over everything. You hear a farmer grumble about the tribute collectors, who'll come for their share of your maize and beans. The Aztec state was relentless, demanding crops to feed nobles, priests, and warriors. You're expected to hand over half your harvest, leaving just enough to survive. It's unfair, but complaining won't help. You see a noble's canoe glide by, its occupant shaded by a canopy. He doesn't glance at you, but you feel his power. The chinampas fed the empire, but the farmers got little in return. You keep working. The rhythm of your hoe, a steady beat. The canal water laps softly, and you're starting to feel the pull of sleep. This life was brutal. But it had moments of beauty, the green of the maize, the camaraderie, the hope that tomorrow's harvest would be enough. You pedal on, ready for the next task. But your eyes are heavy, lulled by the Chinampa's endless grind. Section 6. You're back in the canals of Tenochtitlan. The Chinampas glowing like green islands under the relentless sun. The air is thick with the scent of mud and crushed herbs. But there's a tension now, a ripple in the water that makes your grip tighten on the paddle. You're about to navigate the waterways that crisscross these floating gardens. A lifeline for farmers, but also a maze of dangers. Snakes slither through the reeds. Crocodiles lurk in the shallows. And the currents can pull your canoe into chaos. You steer carefully, watching the farmers paddle their own boats, loaded with maize and chilies, their faces set with focus. This isn't just a scenic boat ride, it's a high-stakes journey where one wrong turn could cost you everything. Let's glide into the perilous world of Aztec waterways. But don't expect a lazy river. This is history at its slipperiest, perfect for drifting off, as you imagine the splash of water and the hiss of hidden threats. Your canoe is a shallow, wooden vessel, carved from a single log and slick with algae. You dip your paddle, feeling the water's resistance, and steer through a narrow canal. The Chinampas loom on either side, their edges fringed with reeds that rustle in the breeze. These canals are the arteries of Tenochtitlan, carrying crops to market, water to crops, and people to work. Historians estimate the city had over 100 miles of canals, a network so vast it rivaled Venice. You're impressed, but also nervous. The water's murky, hiding who knows what. You spot a farmer poling his canoe, his balance perfect, despite the heavy load of squash. You try to mimic him, but your boat wobbles, and you nearly tip. Not exactly Olympic material, are you? The farmers make it look easy, but they've spent their lives on these waters, dodging dangers you're just starting to notice. Snakes are the first threat. You see one, a water snake, its scales glinting like obsidian slithering through the reeds. It's harmless, probably, but your heart skips anyway. The Aztecs knew worse. Cottonmouths and rattlesnakes haunted the lake's edges, their bites deadly without modern antivenom. You watch a farmer prod the reeds with a stick before stepping onto his chinampa. A routine precaution, quirky tidbit. Some Aztecs believed snakes were messengers of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, and killing one could bring bad luck. You're not sure if that farmer's being cautious or superstitious, but you're steering clear of the reeds. A bite out here meant fever, swelling, and a long, painful wait to see if the gods spared you. You pedal faster, the water slapping your canoe, and hope you don't meet Quetzalcoatl's cousin today. Crocodiles are the real terror. You spot a ripple, then a pair of eyes breaking the surface. Cold and unblinking. It's a caiman, smaller than a Nile croc, but no less dangerous. You freeze, paddle mid-air, as it glides past, its tail stirring the water. The Aztecs called them cipactli, mythical beasts tied to creation stories. Farmers respected them, but didn't love them. Caimans could snatch a careless worker or tip a canoe, spilling crops into the lake. You hear a story from a passing farmer last year. A boy lost his leg to a caiman while fishing. He survived, barely, but now he's landbound, weaving baskets instead of farming. You shudder, imagining those jaws. Archaeological evidence shows caiman teeth in Aztec sites, proof they were hunted, or at least fought off. You're glad your canoe's sturdy, but you're not testing it against a living dinosaur. The currents are another foe. You feel the water tug your canoe, pulling you toward a wider canal where the flow is stronger. You paddle hard, muscles burning, to stay on course. The lake's currents were unpredictable, fed by springs and rivers, and a sudden surge could smash your boat against a chinampa or drag you into open water. You see a farmer tie his canoe to a stake, securing it before unloading his harvest. Storms made it worse. Rain could turn the canals into rapids, washing away crops and even lives. Scholars debate how often flooding wrecked chinampas. Some say it was rare. Others argue it was a constant threat. You lean toward the latter, feeling the water's pull. You're no expert, but you know one thing. Lake Texcoco doesn't play nice. You steer into a calmer channel, relieved. But your arms are screaming for a break. The canals aren't just dangerous, they're alive with activity. You paddle past merchants, their canoes piled with beans and marigolds, heading for Tlatelolco's market. Kids swim in the shallows, laughing despite the risks. A woman washes maize in the water, her hands quick and sure. It's a community, bound by the lake, but every move is calculated. You notice the farmers' canoes are narrow, built for speed and stability, with low sides to haul heavy loads. You try poling your boat, mimicking a farmer, but the pole sticks in the mud, and you nearly topple. Smooth move. Right, the Aztecs used no wheels or horses. Canoes were their trucks, carrying everything from crops to building materials. You're starting to see why they were masters of this watery world. But you're also grateful for modern roads and GPS. Wildlife isn't all bad. You spot a heron, its wings slicing the air as it hunts fish. Frogs croak from the reeds, and dragonflies dart like jeweled arrows. The lake's an ecosystem, feeding birds, fish, and even the chinampas with nutrients. Farmers sometimes netted fish, tilapia, carp to supplement their diet. You see a boy toss a net, pulling up a wriggling catch. It's a small victory, but it means dinner. You're tempted to try, but your fishing skills are more flailing than finesse. The lake gave life, but it demanded respect. You paddle past a chinampa where a farmer scatters fish bones as fertilizer, a trick that boosted yields. It's clever, but the smell makes you wrinkle your nose. You're betting these farmers didn't have air fresheners, just noses tougher than yours. The spiritual side of the canals is ever present. You see a small altar on a chinampa, adorned with shells and a clay figurine of Chalchiuhtlicue, the goddess of streams. A farmer offers a fish, its scales glinting, and mutters a prayer. The Aztecs believed the lake was divine, its waters, a gift, but also a test. A capsized canoe wasn't just bad luck, it was a sign you displeased the goddess. You feel the weight of it. Steering carefully, priests sometimes paddled these canals, performing rituals to keep the waters calm. You spot one now, his canoe draped in flowers, chanting softly. It's eerie, the sound blending with the lap of water. You bow your head, not wanting to tempt fate. The gods were as real as the snakes here, and you're not taking chances. The farmers' lives revolve around these waterways. You watch a family load their canoe with maize, the kids helping despite their small size. They're learning early by 10. You're expected to paddle like a pro. You try to imagine growing up here. Your playground, a maze of canals, your toys, paddles, and nets. It's a hard life. But there's camaraderie. Farmers call to each other, sharing warnings about currents or caimans. You hear laughter, a rare break in the grind. A woman splashes her brother with water, and he retaliates. Their canoes rocking. It's a moment of joy. And you smile. But the sun's still blazing, and the work never stops. You paddle on, the canal narrowing, the chinampas closing in, the water's cool against your hands. But you're wary. Something's always watching from the depths. This paradise is dangerous, but it's home to these farmers, and somehow they make it work. Section 7. You're still gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the chinampas shimmering like green jewels in the late afternoon light. The air carries the sharp tang of wet reeds and the faint smoke of burning copal, a scent that prickles your senses with something ancient, almost otherworldly. You're about to witness the eerie rituals that unfold among these floating gardens, ceremonies honoring the water gods who rule this lake. Your canoe drifts closer to a chinampa, where farmers gather, their faces solemn, hands clutching offerings of flowers and maize. This isn't just farming anymore, it's a sacred dance with the divine, where every gesture carries the weight of cosmic balance. The water laps softly against your boat, but there's a hush now, a stillness that makes your skin prickle. Let's slip into the mystical world of Aztec garden rituals. But don't expect a cozy prayer session. This is history at its most haunting. Perfect for drifting off as you imagine the flicker of torchlight and the chant of ancient voices. You pull your canoe alongside a chinampa, its edges lined with marigolds, glowing like tiny flames. A small altar stands at the center, adorned with shells, feathers, and a clay idol of Chalchiuhtlicue, the goddess of lakes and streams. Her image is serene, but her power is absolute. The lake is her domain, and these farmers know it. You watch as a man, his face painted with black and red streaks, scatters maize kernels into the water, muttering a prayer. The Aztecs believed every canal, every chinampa, was alive with divine energy, and rituals like this kept the gods appeased. Historians note that water deities were central to Aztec religion, given the lake's role in sustaining Tenochtitlan's 200 souls. Without Chalchiuhtlicue's favor, the canals could dry, the chinampas could sink, and the city could starve. You feel the weight of it, your paddle resting in your lap, as the farmer's chant rises, low and rhythmic. The ritual begins in earnest. You see a woman light a bundle of copal resin, its smoke curling like a ghost over the water. The scent is sharp, almost dizzying, and you blink as it stings your eyes. Copal was the Aztecs' incense, a bridge to the divine, and they burned it generously. You watch the smoke drift, blending with the haze of late afternoon. The farmers kneel, offering marigolds and fish, their hands trembling slightly. These aren't just gifts, they're a plea for mercy. A belle harvest, a flooded canal, could mean the gods are angry, and nobody wants to test their patience. Quirky tidbit: some farmers tied offerings to reeds, letting them float as messages to Chalchiuhtlicue. You imagine a fish nibbling one and chuckle softly. But the farmers' faces are grim. This is no game. Every flower, every kernel, is a bet against cosmic wrath. The priest arrives, his canoe gliding silently, draped in green cloth and laden with ritual tools. He's young, his head shaved, except for a single braid, his cloak embroidered with water motifs. You bow your head instinctively. Feeling his authority, he steps onto the chinampa, barefoot, and begins a chant in Nahuatl, the words flowing like the lake itself. You don't understand, but the cadence is hypnotic, lulling you into a half-dream. He sprinkles water from a clay vessel, blessing the plot, then offers a quail, its blood dripping into the canal. You wince, but sacrifice was part of this world, a small life for a big harvest. The Aztecs believed blood fed the gods, keeping the sun moving and the rains falling. You're uneasy, but you respect the logic in a world this precarious. You pay what the divine demands. The priest's voice rises, and you feel a chill, as if the lake itself is listening. The farmers join in, their voices weaving with the priests. You watch them place maize cobs on the altar, each one perfect, chosen for its size and color. These aren't just crops, they're sacred, embodiments of Sentiotl, the maize god. You recall the marigolds from earlier, their golden petals offered to Xochipilli, and realize every plant here has a divine patron. The chinampas are a temple, every stalk a prayer. You try to imagine the pressure. A blemished cob, a wilted flower, could offend the gods. Scholars debate how often these rituals happen daily for some, weekly for others, but their frequency shows how deeply the Aztecs tied farming to faith. You're struck by the devotion, the farmer's hands moving with care, as if each gesture holds the world together. You paddle quietly, not wanting to disturb the moment. The waters ripple. The only sound, the ceremony shifts to Tlaloc, the rain god, whose temper could make or break a season. You see the priest raise a jade amulet, carved with Tlaloc's goggle-eyed face, and chant for rain not too much, not too little. The farmers echo him, their voices urgent. You glance at the sky, clear now, but you know storms can sweep in fast, turning canals into torrents. Last week, a chinampa nearby was swamped, its crops lost. You feel the farmers fear too much rain, and their work drowns, too little, and it withers. Tlaloc was fickle, and his rituals were intense. You hear whispers of darker offerings, children, sometimes given to ensure rain. You shudder, grateful this ceremony sticks to quail and maize. The Aztecs' world was harsh, and their gods demanded harsh tribute. You're glad you're just a visitor. Your canoe, a safe retreat. The ritual's climax is a dance. You watch the farmers move in a slow circle, their steps deliberate, mimicking the flow of water. The priest beats a small drum, its rhythm like a heartbeat. You're mesmerized, the motion blending with the chant, the smoke, the glint of water. It's beautiful, but eerie. These people are dancing for survival, not joy. You try to imagine their lives, tied to these rituals. Every day, a prayer to keep the lake kind. The chinampas fed Tenochtitlan, but only if the gods allowed it. You see a child, barely 7, mimicking the dance, her small feet careful in the mud. She's learning early that this is her world water. Work, worship. You feel a pang, wondering if she dreams of anything beyond the canals. The drum slows, and you're lulled, your eyelids heavy. The ceremony ends with a final offering, a basket of fish, lowered into the canal. The priest sprinkles ash, sealing the ritual, and the farmers disperse, their faces relieved but weary. You paddle away, the chinampa fading behind you. The smoke lingers, a reminder of the divine stakes. These rituals weren't just tradition, they were survival, a way to navigate a world where nature and gods held all the cards. You think of the caimans and snakes from earlier, the currents that nearly tipped you. The lake's dangers feel sharper now, tied to the gods' whims. You steer through a narrow canal, the water cool against your paddle. The farmers' chants echo in your mind, a soothing drone that pulls you towards sleep. This paradise is dangerous, not just for its wildlife, but for its divine demons. The farmers' lives are steeped in these rituals. You see another chinampa with a small altar, its offerings, fresh flowers, a fish, a maize cob. Every plot has one, a constant reminder of the god's presence. You watch a man tend his altar, his hands gentle despite their calluses. He's not just a farmer, he's a priest of his own plot, responsible for its spiritual health. You're struck by the intimacy of it, the way faith weaves into every task. The chinampas, are more than gardens, they're sacred ground, where every seed is a prayer, every harvest a miracle. You paddle on, the canal quiet now, the sun dipping lower, the water's rhythm is steady, and you're drifting, lulled by the memory of chance and the promise of rest. This world is harsh, but its rituals are a lifeline, and somehow they keep the farmers going. Section 8. You're drifting through the canals of Tenochtitlan. The Chinampas vibrant under the softening light of late afternoon. The air hums with the scent of damp earth and faint copal smoke from a recent ritual. But your focus shifts to the figures working these floating gardens. Many of them, women, their hands as deft as the men's. Yet their stories often overlooked. You're about to explore the vital, unsung roles of women in Aztec agriculture, tending crops, weaving reeds, and keeping families fed in this watery world. Your canoe glides closer to a chinampa where a woman kneels, planting maize with steady precision, her children nearby hauling water. The lake's dangers, snakes, currents. Gods don't spare her, but she works with a quiet strength that anchors this empire. Let's ease into the lives of these women. But don't expect a gentle tale. This is history at its toughest. Perfect for drifting off, as you imagine their calloused hands and unyielding resolve. You pull alongside a chinampa, watching a woman named Citlali. Let's give her a name. Since history rarely did, she's in her 30s, her hair braided tightly, her magawi fiber cloak stained with mud. She's weeding a row of beans, her fingers quick despite the heat. Women like Citlali were the backbone of Chinampas, not just supporting, but driving Aztec agriculture. Historians estimate women performed half the farming labor, from planting to harvesting, alongside domestic tasks, like grinding maize and weaving. You try weeding beside her, tugging at a stubborn plant. It's harder than it looks. Your hands slip, and the roots snap. Citlali glances over. Her expression unreadable, but you're pretty sure she's judging your technique. You chuckle, imagining her thinking, stick to paddling. Stranger, women didn't just work, they mastered these plots, knowing every quirk of the muddy soil. Citlali's day started before dawn. You picture her rising in a reed hut on the Chinampa's edge, the lake whispering outside. She lit a fire, ground maize for tortillas, and fed her kids, 2 boys and a girl, all under 10, already helping with chores. Now she's out here, planting, weeding, and checking squash for pests. You notice her hands, scarred from years of wielding obsidian blades and twisting reeds. Women often manage the Chinampa's edges, weaving mats to hold the mud together. You try it, your fingers fumbling with the tough fibers. It's like braiding steel cables, and you're bleeding within minutes. Citlali doesn't flinch. Her hands are tougher than your modern ones. Quirky tidbit: some women chewed Maggie sap to soothe blisters. A natural bandage that tasted like bitter glue. You're grateful for imaginary band-aids. But Citlali had no such luxury. The lake's dangers hit women hard. You see Citlali pause, scanning the water for ripples, caimans, or snakes. Don't discriminate. Women often worked near the canals, hauling water or washing crops, making them vulnerable. You recall the caiman story from earlier, the boy who lost his leg, and wonder how many women faced similar fates. Archaeological evidence shows women's skeletons with fractures and stress injuries, proof of lives spent in perilous labor. You paddle closer, noticing Citlali's daughter, maybe 8, carrying a clay jug of water. She's careful, avoiding the reeds where snakes hide. You feel a pang. Girls learned early that the lake was both provider and predator. Citlali calls to her, her voice sharp but warm. guiding her back to safety. This isn't just work, it's survival. And women taught their kids to navigate it. Women's roles went beyond farming. You watch Sitlali barter with a passing merchant, trading chilies for fish. Her voice is firm, her math quick. She knows the value of every pod. Women often managed household economies, selling surplus crops at Tlatelolco's market. You imagine Sitlali there, her canoe loaded, haggling with nobles for cacao or cloth. Scholars debate how much autonomy women had. Some say they were economic powerhouses. Others argue their roles were limited by Aztec patriarchy. You lean toward the former. Sitlali's confidence suggests she's no pushover. She's not just feeding her family, she's keeping them afloat in a system that demands taxes and tribute. You try calculating a trade in your head, 10 chilies for a fish, and give up. Sitlali's got this. And you're just along for the ride. The spiritual weight falls on women too. You see Sitlali place a marigold on a small altar, whispering to Chalchiutliku, the lake goddess. Women were often priestesses of their plots, offering flowers or maize to ensure harvests. You recall the rituals from earlier, the copal smoke and quail blood, and realize women led smaller ceremonies daily. Sitlali's daughter mimics here, placing a tiny flower beside the marigold. It's a quiet moment. But heavy girls learned early that the gods watched every move. You feel the pressure, imagining a wilted offering, angering Tlaloc. Women bore this burden alongside men, their prayers as vital as their labor. You paddle quietly, not wanting to disturb Sitlali's ritual. The waters ripple, blending with her soft chant. Patriarchy shaped everything. You notice Sitlali's deference when a noble's canoe passes. Her head bowed. Aztec society valued women for fertility and labor. But men held power. Sitlali's husband, if he's alive, owns the chinampa. She works it but can't inherit it. Widows, like her, let's say she's widowed, faced worse, scraping by without male protection. You see her son, maybe 12, take on tasks too big for him, trying to fill that gap. Women could gain status as mothers of warriors or priests. But it was a narrow path. You think of noble women, like those serving Xochipilli's temple, who wielded influence, but still answered to men. Sitlali's life is simpler, but no less vital. She feeds the empire, one maize cob at a time. You're struck by her resilience, working under a system that rarely rewarded her. The physical toll is brutal. You try hauling a basket of mud, mimicking Sitlali, and your back screams after one trip. Women's skeletons show arthritis, spinal wear, and pelvic stress from childbirth and labor. Sitlali's likely had multiple pregnancies, maybe 5, with only 3 kids surviving. You recall the high child mortality from earlier, the tiny graves, and feel a pang for her losses. She works through it, her face set with determination. You see her rub her shoulder, maybe from an old injury. Women used herbs episode, sage for pain, but it was a band-aid on a broken system. You're grateful for modern medicine. But Sitlali had only her grit. You paddle past, noticing her daughter's small hands, already calloused. The cycle continues, and you wonder if she'll ever know rest. Community keeps Sitlali going. You see her share a tortilla with a neighbor, their laughter cutting through the grind. Women work together, trading seeds, watching kids, sharing stories. You hear Sitlali tease her friend about a bad chili crop, and they giggle like sisters. It's a spark of joy, rare but real. They eat on the chinampa, maize and fish, passing a clay jug of water. You take a bite, imaginary, of course, and it's chewy, spiced with chilies. The lake's dangers fade for a moment, but not entirely. A snake slithers nearby, and Sitlali shoos it with a stick. Unfazed. You're not so calm. Your paddle ready to fend off any reptiles. These women faced caimans, gods, and taxes, yet found ways to laugh. You're in awe, paddling on. The canal, quiet now. The sun dips lower, painting the chinampas golden. You watch Sitlali tend her plot, her daughter at her side. Women like her were invisible to Aztec chroniclers, but they held Tenochtitlan together. Every maize stalk, every woven reed, bears their mark. You think of the rituals, the crops, the dangers. You've seen women shape them all. Sitlali's life is a grind, but it's also a legacy, feeding an empire while raising the next generation. You paddle through the narrowing canal, the water cool against your hands. Her quiet strength lingers, a soothing presence as your eyelids grow heavy. This paradise is dangerous, but women like Sitlali make it bloom. And somehow, that's enough to carry you towards sleep. Section 9. You're still gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the chinampas vibrant in the fading light, their edges softened by the golden glow of dusk. The air is cooler now, carrying the scent of damp mud and crushed maize leaves. But the work on these floating gardens never stops. You're about to trade your paddle for the tools that shaped these muddy beds, stepping into the world of Aztec farmers as they wield primitive implements to tame Lake Texcoco. Your canoe nudges a chinampa, where a farmer sharpens an obsidian blade, his hands steady despite years of toil. These tools wooden whose reed mats, stone mallets are simple but ingenious, turning a swamp into an empire's breadbasket. This isn't a high-tech workshop, it's a gritty, hands-on struggle, perfect for drifting off as you imagine the scrape of stone and the ache of calloused fingers. You step onto the chinampa, the mud squelching under your bare feet. Cool and slick, the farmer, let's call him Tlacaelel, hands you a koa, a wooden digging stick with a flattened end, worn smooth from years of use. It's heavier than it looks, and you grip it awkwardly, trying to mimic his stance. The koa is the Aztec farmer's multi-tool used to plant, weed, and break up soil. You jab it into the mud, aiming for a row where maize will grow. The earth resists, and your arms strain with the effort. Tlacael watches, his expression neutral, but you're pretty sure he's thinking, this guy's not cut out for chinampas. You chuckle, imagining a modern shovel, but the Aztecs had no metal, only wood, stone, and obsidian. Historians note that these tools were so effective, chinampas yielded up to 4 harvests a year, feeding Tenochtitlan's docenters. 0 souls. You're impressed, but your shoulders are already begging for a break. Next, you try an obsidian blade, its edge glinting like black glass. Tlacael uses it to slice maize cobs, his cuts precise. You take one, careful not to nick your fingers. Obsidian's sharper than surgical steel. You slice a cob, the husk peeling away cleanly. But your hand shakes, and you nearly drop it. Smooth move. Right. These blades were crafted by knapping, chipping stone into razor-thin edges. They were cheap obsidian, was plentiful in volcanic Mexico but fragile, shattering if you hit a rock. You see Tlacael's belt pouch stuffed with spares, like a carpenter's nail bag. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers traded broken blades as jewelry, turning scraps into necklaces for their kids. You imagine a child wearing a jagged pendant, proud of their father's work, and smile. But the blade's sharpness reminds you one slip, and you're bleeding into the mud. Weaving reeds is another task. You sit beside Tlacaela, who's twisting Maggie fibers into a mat to reinforce the chinampa's edge. The fibers are tough, like wiry rope, and your fingers fumble, raw, after a few twists. Tlacaele's hands move like a machine, weaving tight, sturdy mats that hold the mud together. These mats are the chinampa's skeleton without them. The plot would dissolve into the lake. You recall the women from earlier, like Sitlali, who mastered this craft, and realize it's a team effort. The process is grueling, your hands blister, and the magui's sharp edges draw blood. Tlacaele'll choose a leaf to smear sap on his cuts, a natural antiseptic, though it stings like fire. You're wincing, but he's unfazed, his hands tougher than the reeds he weaves. You're starting to see why these tools, simple as they are, demanded skill and endurance. The stone mallet comes next. You watch Tlacaele hammer wooden stakes into the lake bed, each strike echoing across the canal. The mallet's a smooth basalt chunk, heavy enough to drive stakes, but light enough to swing. You try it, your arms burning after one swing, the shock jarring your wrists. The stakes anchor the chinampa, keeping it from drifting in storms. You recall the currents from earlier, nearly tipping your canoe, and understand why this matters. A loose stake could mean a sunken plot. Months of work lost. Scholars debate how often chinampas failed. Some say storms wrecked them regularly. Others argue the Aztecs' engineering was near perfect. You lean toward the former, the lake's unpredictable, and Tlacaele's focused face tells you he's fought it before. You hammer again, mud splashing your legs, and feel the weight of keeping paradise afloat. Watering tools are simpler, but no less vital. You grab a clay jug, its surface rough, and scoop water from the canal. You pour it carefully around maize roots. Avoiding waste, the brackish lake could poison crops if overused. Tlacaele digs a small channel with his koa, guiding fresh water from a spring-fed canal. It's a delicate system, balancing moisture and salinity. You recall the wilted maize from earlier, ruined by salt, and pour with care. The Aztecs had no pumps or hoses, just jugs and muscle. You haul another load, your back aching, the jug's weight pulling at your shoulders. Skeletal remains show farmers with spinal wear and arthritis. Proof of lives spent carrying loads like this. You're grateful for your imaginary chiropractor. But Tlacaele has only his grit and maybe a sage rub for pain. The spiritual side of tools is subtle but real. You notice Tlacaele pows, touching his ko to a small altar before planting. It's a prayer to Sentiotl, the maize god, to bless the work. Tools weren't just objects, they were partners, imbued with divine purpose. You recall the rituals from earlier, the copal smoke and chants, and see how faith weaves into every task. Tlacaele's obsidian blade gleams as he offers a maize leaf to Calchuatlicu, the lake goddess. A dull blade or broken ko could anger the gods, signaling disrespect. You feel the pressure, handling your tools with care. The Aztecs believed their work kept the cosmos spinning, and a snapped reed could tip the balance. You're starting to understand why every strike, every cut, feels like a prayer. Pests make the work harder. You spot a beetle on a maize stalk and flick it off. But Tlacaele's already scattering ash to deter more. Locusts are the real terror. Swarms could strip a chinampa in hours. You recall the farmers' stories? Clouds of insects darkening the sky, and shudder. Smaller pests, worms. Ants nibble constantly. You help Tlacaele crush marigolds, their scent-repelling bugs. But it's a temporary fix. The humid air breeds disease too. Blight can ruin a plot overnight. You see a sickly squash vine, its leaves spotted, and Tlacaele pulls it up, his face grim. Every tool is a weapon in this endless fight. and you're exhausted, just watching. You sit, mud smearing your legs, and feel the Chinampa's rhythm work. Pray. Repeat. Community ties it all together. You see Tlacaelel share his koa with a neighbor, their hands brushing in quiet camaraderie. Farmers trade tools, tips, and stories. Like the time a storm snapped a stake and nearly sank a plot. They laugh, but their eyes are wary, the lake's always listening. You join them for a meal, tortillas and fish, eaten on the Chinampa. The food's simple, spiced with chilies that burn your tongue. You're grateful for the water jug, though you eye it warily, recalling dysentery risks. The group teases a young farmer who broke his blade yesterday, and he grins, sheepish. It's a moment of lightness, rare in this grind. You paddle on, the canal quiet, the tool's weight lingering in your hands. The Chinampas are a marvel, built with sticks and stones, but they're also a testament to human will, lulling you towards sleep. Section 10. You're still gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan. The Chinampas, a patchwork of green under the twilight sky. The air is cooler now, laced with the scent of damp reeds and the faint buzz of insects that never seem to rest. You're about to face the unseen enemies of these floating gardens, pests and plagues that could turn a bountiful plot into a barren wasteland. Your canoe drifts past a Chinampa where a farmer, his face etched with worry, inspects a wilting maize stalk. Locusts, beetles, and blights haunt these gardens, and the lake's humid embrace breeds diseases that strike without warning. This isn't a peaceful harvest, it's a battle against nature's relentless hunger, fought with ash, herbs, and prayers. Let's dive into the gritty struggle to protect the Chinampa's bounty. But don't expect a victory lap. This is history at its most stubborn, perfect for drifting off as you imagine the crunch of insects and the weight of a farmer's desperation. You pull your canoe alongside a chin, the mud soft under your feet as you step ashore. The farmer, let's call him Xochitl, is scattering ash, his maize, his hands moving with urgent precision. Locusts are the nightmare here, swarms that could darken the sky and strip a plot bare in hours. You recall the stories from earlier, clouds of grasshoppers devouring everything, and feel a chill despite the humid air. Xochitl's seen it before, his eyes are wary, scanning the horizon for any sign of a swarm. Historians estimate locust plagues hit Mesoamerica every few years, sometimes wiping out entire harvests, without granaries to fall back on. A bad swarm meant starvation for families and unrest in Tenochtitlan's markets. You grab a bundle of burning sage, waving it to deter pests. But the smoke stings your eyes, and you're coughing like a rookie. Xochitl doesn't flinch. He's used to this fight. But you're already wondering if bug spray was ever an Aztec dream. Smaller pests are a daily grind. You spot a beetle crawling on a squash leaf, its shell glinting like a tiny jewel. You flick it off. But Xochitl's already crushing marigolds, their sharp scent a natural repellent. Beetless, worms, and ants nibble at crops constantly, each bite a threat to survival. You help him sprinkle ash, a trick passed down for generations, but it's a band-aid on a bleeding wound. The Chinampa's damp soil breeds pests faster than you can kill them. You see a row of beans, their leaves riddled with holes, and Xochitl pulls them up, his face grim. It's not just lost food, it's months of work. Duxus unpaid. Maybe a hungry winter. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers tied tiny bells to plants, believing the sound fibers scared bugs away. You imagine the tinkling chorus across the lake and smile. But Xochitl's not laughing. Every pest is a thief, and he's got no patience for their music. Disease is an even stealthier foe. You notice a maize stalk, its leaves spotted with black, drooping like a broken flag. Blight's the culprit, a fungus thriving in the lake's humid air. You help Xochitl cut it out, hoping to save the rest. But the rot spreads fast. You recall the wilted crops from earlier, ruined by salt or blight, and realize how fragile these gardens. The Aztecs had no microscopes, no concept of fungi, but they knew blight could ruin a season. They burned infected plants, scattered ash, and prayed to Sentiotl, the maize god, for mercy. Skeletal remains show farmers with weakened bones from malnutrition after bad harvests. Proof of disease's ripple effects. You're grateful for modern fungicides. But Xochitl has only his koa and his faith. You slice another stalk, the sap sticky on your hands, and feel the weight of his worry. The lake itself breeds trouble. You swat a mosquito, its whine a constant torment. These pests weren't just annoying, they carried fevers that could fell a healthy worker in days. You recall the caimans and snakes from earlier. But mosquitoes were deadlier, spreading diseases we'd call malaria or dengue. The Aztecs didn't know germs, but they felt the consequences: sweats, chills, death. You see Xochitl rub his arm, maybe from an old bite, and wonder how many he's lost to fever. He burns sage, its smoke curling over the chinampa. But it's a weak defense. You're starting to understand why farmers prayed so much. Nature was a relentless enemy, and every day was a gamble. You paddle to another plot, helping scatter marigolds. Their scent sharp but fleeting. The mosquitoes don't care, and you're itching already. OC human for pests are a problem too. You hear Xochitl grumble about thieves, small kids or desperate neighbors, sneaking onto chin blight ampers just at natural night to steal maize or chilies. The lake's canals make it. You recall easy canoes glide silently. And quail. A quick snatch is hard as to catch. You spot a farmer tying thorny maggie leaves around his plot's edge. Natural barbed wire. It's clever, but not foolproof. Thieves risked flogging, or worse, if caught. But hunger drove them to it. Scholars debate how common theft was. Some say it spiked during droughts. Others argue the Aztecs' tight, fresh community kept it rare. You lean toward the former, the taxes you heard about earlier. Stripping half a harvest. I would push anyone to desperation. You help Xochitl tear a maguey leaf, its spines pricking your fingers, and feel his frustration. This paradise is a battleground, even against your own. The spiritual fight is constant. You watch Xochitl place a maize cob on a small altar, muttering to Calchiutlicu, the lake goddess. Pests and plagues weren't just nature, they were divine tests. A locust swarm meant Tlaloc was angry. A blighted crop, a sign of Sentiotl's displeasure. You recall the rituals from earlier, the copal smoke and quail blood, and see how they reeds tie to this. Xochitl's altar is modest shells. Hold, but it's a lifeline. He believes his prayers keep the pests at bay. And not sure he's wrong. The Aztec's faith was practical. Born of a world where locusts could end you. You help him light copal, the smoke soothing despite its sting. The chant he murmurs is low, hypnotic, pulling you towards sleep. You're starting to feel the chinampa's rhythm work. Fight, pray, repeat. The community is a shield. You see Xochitl share ash with a hands brushing in quiet solidarity. Farmers, tradesmen, pest-fighting spiced tricks, marigolds, ash, even urine to mark plots against thieves. They softly eat the together. Tortillas and fish pass nets around. Stories, the chilies burning your tongue. You recall Citlali's laughter from earlier, And see it big here too. A woman teases Nyokal about his bell trick. And he grins. Sheepish. It's her spark strength of rare in this grind. They watch each other's plots. Warn of swarms or thieves. You help scatter sage. The smoke blending with the lake's mist. The pests keep coming. But the farmers keep fighting. Their tools and prayers a fragile defense. You paddle on. The canal quiet. The air heavy with insects. The chinampas are a marvel. But they're also a war zone. Lulling you towards sleep with the buzz of survival. The toll is relentless. You see Xochitl's hands, scarred from years of cuts and bites. His shoulders hunched from hauling mud. Farmers faced malnutrition when pests won. Their kids' bellies swelling with hunger. You recall the child mortality from earlier, the tiny graves, and feel a pang for Xochitl's losses. He works through it, scattering ash, praying for a clean harvest. The lake's diseases, fevers, parasites hit hard, and chinampas were breeding grounds. You swat another mosquito, grateful for your imaginary immunity. Xochitl has no such luck. His eyes tired but resolute. You paddle through the narrowing canal, the water cool against your hands. The fight against pests and plagues is endless. But Nuchitl's tenacity is a quiet lullaby, soothing you as you drift toward dreams of green stalks and buzzing wings. Section 11. You're still gliding through the canals of Tenochtitlan, the chinampas fading into twilight's soft purple haze. The air is alive with the scent of damp earth and roasted maize, mingling with the chatter of voices echoing across the water. You're about to leave the floating gardens behind and paddle toward the bustling Tlatelolco market, where farmers barter their chinampa goods in a high-stakes dance of trade. Your canoe is loaded with maize, chilies, and marigolds, their colors vibrant against the worn wood. The market's hum grows louder, merchants shouting, buyers angling. The clink of cacao beans changing hands. This isn't just a shopping trip, it's a crucible where a bad deal could mean hunger, and a good one could secure your family's winter. Let's dive into the chaotic, vibrant world of Aztec market days. But don't expect a calm bazaar. This is history at its loudest, perfect for drifting off as you imagine the crush of crowds and the weight of a farmer's hopes. You steer your canoe into a wider canal, joining a stream of boats heading for Tlatelolco, Tenochtitlan's great marketplace. The water is crowded, canoes bumping as farmers and merchants jostle for space. Your arms ache from paddling, but the market's energy pulls you forward. Tlatelolco was a marvel, historians estimate. It served 60 people daily, a sprawling hub where chinampa goods fueled the empire's economy. You dock at a wooden platform, tying your canoe with a reed rope, and step into the fray. The market is a riot of color and sound: red chilies, green squash, golden marigolds, vendors shouting their wares in Nahuatl. You're overwhelmed, nearly tripping over a basket of beans. Smooth move. Right, you steady yourself, clutching your maize, and plunge into the crowd, ready to barter for your family's survival. Your first stop is a fishmonger's stall, the air sharp with the tang of lake carp. You offer a bundle of chilies, their heat a prized commodity. The vendor, a wiry woman with a quick smile, inspects them, sniffing one and nodding. You haggle, your voice rising over the market's din, settling on 10 chilies for 3 fish. It's a fair deal, but your heart's racing. Every trade is a gamble. The Aztecs used no coins. Cacao beans were currency. But farmers like you often bartered goods directly. You recall Citlali from earlier, her sharp bargaining skills, and channel her confidence. Quirky tidbit: Some vendors cheated by hollowing cacao beans and filling them with dirt. You check yours later, relieved they're solid. But your betting plenty got duped in this chaos. The fishmonger wraps your catch in reeds. And you move on. Your canoe lighter, but your nerves taut. Maize is your big ticket. You approach a noble's agent. His cloak embroidered with quetzal feathers. His stare cold. Nobles bought in bulk for temples or feasts. And a good deal could secure your taxes. You offer 2 baskets of maize. Perfect cobs you harvested with Xochitl's tools. The agent inspects them, picking at a kernel, and offers 30 cacao beans, half what you need. You argue, pointing out the maize's quality, but he's unmoved. You settle for 4-2, a compromise that stings. Taxes take half your harvest, and a bad trade like this could leave you short. Historians note that markets like Tlatelolco were tightly regulated, judges patrolled, punishing cheats with flogging or worse. You spot one now, his staff raised, and steer clear, grateful your deal was honest. If unfair, you tuck the cacao beans into your pouch, feeling the empire's weight on your shoulders. Marigolds are next. Their golden petals, a hot commodity for rituals. You recall the ceremonies from earlier, the copal smoke and chants to Chalchiutlicu, and know these flowers are sacred. You approach a priestess, her hair adorned with jade, her eyes sharp. She's buying for a temple, and you offer a bundle. Their scent peppery in the air. She likes them, offering a small obsidian blade, sharp, valuable, perfect for your chinampa. You hesitate. Blades are rare, but you need cloth for your kids. You counter, asking for both, and she laughs. Impressed. You settle for the blade and a scrap of cotton. A small win. Scholars debate women's roles in markets. Some say they dominated trade. Others argue men held sway. You lean toward the former. This priestess drives a hard bargain. And your betting Sitlali would too. You stow your goods, your hands trembling with relief. The market's dangers are real. You dodge a pickpocket, a kid darting through the crowd, eyeing your cacao beans. Theft was common, and guards with obsidian-tipped clubs patrolled, ready to crack skulls. You recall the thieves from earlier, risking thorns or worse for a stolen cob, and grip your pouch tighter. The crowd's a hazard too. Elbows jab, feet trample, and you're nearly knocked into a canal. You steady yourself, heart pounding, and notice a farmer arguing with a vendor. Their voices rising. Disputes could turn ugly. A bad deal might end in a brawl or a judge's wrath. You keep moving. Your canoe a safe retreat if things go south. The market's a lifeline, but it's also a jungle. Every trade, a test of wits and nerve. The spiritual side pulses through the market. You pass a small altar, adorned with marigolds and maize, where vendors pray to Yakutekutli, the trade god. A merchant offers a cacao bean, muttering for luck. You recall Xochitl's altar, his prayers against pests, and see the same faith here. Every trade is a divine act, blessed or cursed by the gods. You pose, offering a chili to the altar, hoping for a good day. A priest chants nearby, his voice blending with the market's roar, and you feel the cosmic stakes fail here. And you risk more than hunger. You risk divine displeasure. The Aztecs believed markets were sacred, their chaos a reflection of the universe's order. You're starting to see why every deal feels like a prayer. And you're praying yours. Hold up. Community binds the chaos. You see farmers like Xochitl and Sitlali, trading goods and gossip, their laughter cutting through the din. A woman shares a tortilla, its chilly heat waking you up. You take a bite, grateful, and hear stories a good trade. A bad storm. A kid caught stealing. They tease a young farmer who overpaid for fish. And he grins. Sheepish. It's a spark of joy. Rare in this grind. They watch each other's stalls. Warn of pickpockets. Share tips on nobles' tastes. You join them, offering a marigold, and feel the warmth of their bond. The market's a battle, but they fight it together. You stow your goods, the canoe heavy now, and paddle back into the canal. The market's hum fading. The water's cool, soothing, pulling you toward sleep. The toll is heavy. You feel the ache in your arms, the weight of cacao beans, the sting of a bad deal. Farmers faced worse. Failed trades meant unpaid taxes. Hungry kids. Maybe debt bondage. You recall the high child mortality from earlier, the tiny graves, and imagine the desperation driving every haggle. The market was a lifeline, but it could choke you too. You see a farmer, his face drawn, counting cacao beans that won't stretch far enough. You paddle past, grateful for your imaginary safety net. But these farmers had none. The Chinampas fed the market fed the empire, and the farmers bore the cost. You drift through the quiet canal, the stars emerging, their light a soft lullaby. Tlatelocus cowslingers. But the water's rhythm carries you toward dreams of crowded stalls and golden marigolds. Section 12. You're back in the canals of Tenochtitlan. The Chinampas now shadowy patches under a starlit sky, their edges barely visible in the moonlight. The air is cool, scented with damp reeds and the faint tang of lake water. But there's a new tension, a distant murmur of voices, and the clank of metal that doesn't belong. You're about to see the floating gardens through foreign eyes. Those of the Spanish conquistadors who arrived in 1519. Marveling at this watery paradise, yet blind to its fragility, your canoe glides silently, keeping to the shadows, as you spot a strange boat ahead broad, heavy, carrying men in gleaming armor. Their gazes sweep the Chinampas, wide with wonder, but sharp with greed. This isn't a farmer's tale anymore. It's a clash of worlds, where beauty becomes a target. Let's slip into the moment when Cortés and his men first saw this dangerous paradise. But don't expect a warm welcome. This is history at its most uneasy. Perfect for drifting off as you imagine the glint of steel and the weight of impending change. You steer your canoe closer, staying low. The waters ripple, the only sound. The Spanish boat is clumsy compared to yours, its oars splashing loudly. You count a dozen men, their faces bearded, their helmets catching the moonlight. They're whispering in a tongue you don't know Spanish, harsh and guttural to your ears. One, taller than the rest, points at a Chinampa bursting with maize and marigolds, his voice rising in awe. This is Hernán Cortés. Or so you guess. The man who'll unravel this empire. His chronicler, Bernal Diaz, later wrote that Tenochtitlan's canals and gardens seemed like an enchanted vision, surpassing anything in Europe. You see why the Chinampas glow like emerald rafts. The city's temples, looming like stone dreams. But you're uneasy. These men's wonder feels like a predator's gaze. Sizing up, prey. The conquistador's awe is genuine, though you paddle parallel, catching their gestures toward the canals, the neat rows of squash and beans. They've never seen anything like this floating farms, fed by a lake, sustaining a city larger than most in Spain. Historians estimate Tenochtitlan's population at those centers, Ling, dwarfing Seville's 50. Ling. The Chinampas' yields, up to 4 harvests a year, are a miracle to men used to single crop fields. You see a soldier, his armor dented, lean over to pluck a chili from a plot. He bites it, then spits, coughing as the heat hits. You stifle a laugh. Those chilies aren't forgiving to strangers. Quirky tidbit. The Spanish mistook chilies for black pepper at first. A mix-up that led to some red-faced meals, but their ore masks something darker. You notice another soldier's hand on his sword, his eyes scanning for gold. Not crops. The farmers notice too. You spot Xochitl from earlier, his canoe tucked behind a chinampa. Watching the strangers, his face is tense, his hand gripping a wooden club. The Aztecs welcomed Cortés at first, believing he might be Quetzalcoatl's emissary. But suspicion is growing. You recall Citlali's strength, her Kiet bartering, and wonder how she'd face these men. The Chinampas are her world, but the Spanish see them as a curiosity, a resource to exploit. You paddle closer, hearing a farmer whisper to another in Nahuatl. Their voice is low. They're not fools. These armored men aren't here to trade marigolds. The lake's calm, but you feel the storm brewing. The same tension you felt in Tlatelolco's market. Only sharper. These gardens are a paradise. But to the Spanish, they're a prize. The conquistadors' ignorance is striking. You watch them prod a chinampa's edge, marveling at its reed mats. But they don't grasp the labor behind it, the koas, the obsidian blades, the endless repairs you saw with Tlacaelel. They see abundance, not the delicate balance of freshwater channels or prayers to Chalchiutlicue. One soldier tries to step onto a plot, his boot sinking in mud, and he stumbles, cursing. The farmers hide their smirks, but you see their pride. The chinampas are theirs, built with sweat and faith, not steel. Scholars debate how the Spanish viewed Aztec agriculture. Some say they admired it. Others argue they dismissed it as primitive. You lean toward the latter. These men's eyes linger on temples, not reeds. Dreaming of gold, not maize. You paddle quietly, avoiding their notice. Your canoe, a shadow in the dark. The spiritual clash is subtle but real. You see a farmer place a marigold on a small altar, whispering to Tlaloc. As the Spanish pass, their cross, glinting on a soldier's chest, means nothing to him. The Aztecs' gods live in the lake. The crops, the rituals you witnessed earlier, the copal smoke, the quail blood. The Spanish bring their own god, one who doesn't know these waters. You recall the priest's chants, the farmer's dances, and realize how alien this faith must seem to Cortés. He sees altars and assumes idolatry, not understanding their role in keeping the Chinampas alive. You feel the gap widening, a fracture that'll soon crack this world apart. The soldier who ate the chili mutters something about savages, and you wince, knowing what's coming. The lake's still, but its gods are watching. The Spanish don't see the Chinampas' fragility. You paddle past a plot showing signs of blight, its maize spotted from the pests Xochitl fought. The lake's currents, the locusts, the fevers you've seen, they're invisible to these newcomers. They marvel at the canals, not the labor to keep them clear. The stakes Tlacael hammered. A soldier points at a caiman's ripple, laughing, unaware of the danger you felt earlier. They're dazzled, but their dazzle is shallow, to missing the grind that makes this paradise possible. You think of Citlali's calloused hands, Xochitl's ash-scattered crops, and feel a pang for what's at risk. The Spanish see a garden, you see a way of life, teetering on the edge of their swords. The farmers' lives are shifting already. You see Xochitl paddle away, his canoe low with unsold maize, trade slowing as rumors of the strangers spread. The market's chaos, the bartering you navigated, feels distant now, replaced by wariness. You imagine Citlali hiding her kids, fearing these men's intentions. The Chinampas feed Tenochtitlan, but the Spanish bring disruption disease. Demands. Destruction. Smallpox will soon ravage, though you don't know it yet. Decimating farmers before swords are drawn. Archaeological evidence shows mass graves from 1524. A grim hint of what's coming. You're grateful for your imaginary immunity. But these farmers face a real threat. Their resilience tested beyond pests or floods. You paddle on, the Spanish boat fading, their voices carrying over the water, a jarring note in the lake's lullaby. The community holds fast. For now, you see farmers signaling each other with torches flickering across the canals, sharing warnings about the strangers. They're not panicking yet, but the camaraderie you felt at the market is turning to vigilance. A woman's voice, maybe Citlali's, calls softly, urging a child to hurry home. You recall their laughter, their shared meals, and hope it survives what's coming. They eat together still. Tortillas and fish. But talk is hushed. Eyes on the horizon, you paddle through a narrow canal. The water cool against your hands. The stars bright above. The Chinampas glow faintly. A testament to a world these strangers don't understand. The Spanish's awe is a fleeting echo, but it's a shadow over paradise, lulling you towards sleep with the tension of a bowstring, taut and waiting to snap. Section 13. You're still in the canals of Tenochtitlan, but the air feels heavier now, thick with the scent of smoke and the distant wail of chaos. The Chinampas, once vibrant patches of green, Aare under Siege, their muddy beds trembling as the Spanish conquest of 1,521 tears through the Aztec capital. Your canoe glides through darkened waters, the moonlight casting eerie shadows on plots now scarred by battle. You're about to witness the destruction of these floating gardens. Caught in the crossfire of Cortés' relentless campaign, farmers like Xochitl and Citlali fight to save their crops. But swords, smallpox, and fire are rewriting their world. This isn't a farmer's struggle anymore, it's a requiem for a paradise lost. Let's drift into the heart of the Chinampas' fall. But don't expect a gentle fader. This is history at its rawest. Perfect for drifting off, as you imagine the crack of breaking reeds and the weight of a crumbling empire. You steer your canoe through a narrow canal, the water murky with ash and debris. The Chinampas around you are battered, some half submerged, their maize trampled, others burning, their edges licked by flames. The Spanish siege, begun in May 1521, has turned Tenochtitlan into a war zone. Cortés forces, allied with rival tribes like the Tlaxcalans, have blockaded the city, cutting off food and water. The Chinampas, once feeding 200 Ling, are now targets raided by invaders, abandoned by starving farmers. Historians estimate the siege lasted 93 days, reducing the city to rubble and its population to a fraction. You paddle past a plot where Xochitl kneels, salvaging what maize he can. His face is gaunt, his hands shaking. Smallpox, brought by the Spanish, has ravaged his family. You recall the Spanish awe from earlier, their greedy gazes, and feel a bitter irony. Their enchanted vision is now a graveyard. The destruction is methodical. You spot a Spanish brigantine, a shallow draft ship, slicing through a wider canal, cannon booming. The Aztecs had no answer for these floating fortresses, which bombarded Chinampas and causeways. You flinch as a shot tears through a plot, scattering reeds and mud. Farmers like Citlali once wove those reeds with care. Now they're kindling, The Spanish targeted the Chinampas to starve the city, burning crops and clogging canals with debris. You paddle past a channel choked with broken canoes and wilted squash vines. The water, foul with decay. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers hid maize in underwater baskets, hoping to outlast the siege. You imagine Knockittle diving to bury his harvest, his breath short, and wonder if it survived. The lake, once a lifeline, is now a trap, its currents carrying away the Aztecs' hopes. Smallpox is a silent killer. You see a Chinampa abandoned, its altar toppled, marigolds scattered, the farmer's gone dead or fled. You don't know. Smallpox, introduced by a Spanish soldier in 1520, swept through Tenochtitlan like wildfire, killing up to 40% of the population before the siege even started. You recall the fevers from earlier, mosquito-borne and brutal. But this is worse pustules. Delirium. Death. Nochitl's wife, maybe Sitlali, lies in their hut, her breath ragged. You're grateful for your imaginary immunity. But the farmers had no defense. Skeletal remains from Aztec sites show smallpox scars, proof of its toll. The Chinampas couldn't feed a city of ghosts. And you feel the weight of empty plots, their mud cracking under the sun. You paddle on, avoiding a floating body, your stomach turning. The farmers fight back, but it's disparity. You spot Xochitl and others, armed with obsidian-tipped clubs, defending a Chinampa from Tlaxcalan raiders. They're outnumbered, their faces fierce but hollowed by hunger. The Aztecs used canoes to harass Spanish boats, striking from the reeds. But it's not enough. You recall Tlacalal's tools, the koa, the obsidian blade, and see them now as weapons, slashing at invaders. A farmer falls, his blood staining the water, and you wince, steering clear. The Chinampas were built for life, not war. Their soft mud, no match for steel swords. Scholars debate how many farmers died defending their plots. Some say thousands. Others argue most fled to the mainland. You lean toward the former. Xochitl's defiance tells you he'd die before abandoning his maze. You paddle quietly, the battle's roar fading. But the loss lingers. The spiritual heart breaks too. You pass a toppled altar, Chalchiutlicu's idol shattered, its shells crushed. The rituals you saw the copal smoke. The maize offerings feel like dreams now. The Aztecs believed their gods sustained the Chinampas. But Tlaloc and Sentiotl seem silent as the city burns. You recall the priest's chants, the farmers' dances, and wonder if they blame themselves. A surviving farmer, maybe Xochitl, mutters a prayer, scattering ash over a ruined plot. It's futile, but he clings to faith. The Spanish impose their cross, tearing down altars. But the lake's gods linger in the farmers' hearts. You feel the clash, two worlds, two faiths, one drowning the other. You paddle past. The waters ripple, a faint echo of those chants. Soothing, despite the devastation, the lake itself suffers. You navigate through debris reeds, stakes, fish, all charred or rotting. The canals, once clear for trade and irrigation, are clogged. The freshwater springs buried under silt. You recall the caiman's ripples, the heron's grace, now replaced by the stench of war. The Chinampa's delicate balance freshwater, mud, prayers is shattered. The Spanish don't understand. They see only conquest, not the labor of centuries. You think of Sitlali's hands, weaving reeds, and Xochitl's ash against pests. All undone. The lake's ecosystem, pushed to its limits even before the siege, collapses under this assault. Scholars argue the Chinampas could have recovered with time, but the conquest's speed 2 years from Cortés' arrival to Tenochtitlan's fall left no chance. You paddle through ash-streaked water, the stars dim above, and feel the lake's grief. The farmers' lives are unraveling. You see Xochitl load his canoe with what's left half a basket of maize, a few chilies heading for a mainland refuge. His kids are gone, maybe dead, maybe hiding. You recall Citlali's daughter, her small hands on the altar, and hope she's safe. Survivors face enslavement or forced labor under Spanish rule, their chinampas seized or neglected. You paddle past a plot where a Spanish soldier stands, claiming it with a flag. He doesn't know its history, the tools, the rituals, the lives poured into it. The community you saw at Tlatelolco, sharing tortillas and laughter, is scattered. Some farmers resist, others submit, but all lose their world. You feel their despair. Your paddle heavy. As you glide through the wreckage, the Chinampas' fall is a microcosm of the empire's collapse. You see Tenochtitlan's Great Pyramid in the distance, its stones blackened, its priests gone, the market's chaos, the bartering for marigolds, is a memory now, replaced by looting and screams. You recall the Spanish's awe, their enchanted vision, and see its cost paradise, burned for gold, that wasn't there. The Chinampas fed an empire, but they couldn't feed it through siege and plague. You paddle through a quiet canal, the water sluggish, the stars faint. Xochitl's silhouette fades. His canoe, a ghost on the lake. The destruction is total, but its echo is soft, a lullaby of loss that pulls you towards sleep. This paradise is gone. Its mud and reeds a testament to a world that fought, loved, and fell. Section 14. You're gliding through the canals of what was once Tenochtitlan, but the vibrant Chinampas are now ghosts. Their outlines faint under a starlit sky in modern Mexico City. 2025. The air is heavy with the hum of distant traffic and the faint scent of wet earth, a whisper of the lake that once ruled here. You're about to uncover the traces of those floating gardens, their legacy buried beneath centuries of urban sprawl, yet still alive in fragments of mud and memory. Your canoe feels out of place, a relic navigating waters long drained. But the Chinampas' story lingers in the soil, the people, and the canals that refuse to vanish. This isn't a tale of triumph. It's a quiet elegy for a lost paradise, perfect for drifting off as you imagine the echoes of maize stalks and the resilience of a culture that endures. Let's paddle into the faint traces of the Chinampas' legacy. But don't expect a grand revival, just soft remnants in a city that's forgotten its roots. You steer through a narrow canal in Xochimilco, a southern borough of Mexico City, where the last Chinampas cling to life. The water is murky, littered with plastic bottles, but the plots are green, tended by farmers who call them Chinampas with pride. These are shadows of the originals, smaller, less fertile, hemmed in by concrete, but they're real. You see a farmer, maybe a descendant of Xochitl or Citlali, hoeing a row of maize, his hands calloused like theirs. Historians estimate fewer than 2.000 hectares of Chinampas remain, a fraction of the 20 meal that fed Tenochtitlan. UNESCO protects Xochimilco as a World Heritage Site, but urban sprawl and pollution threaten its survival. You paddle closer, the canal's banks lined with willows, and feel a pang for the lake that's now a memory. Drained by Spanish colonists to build their city, the Chinampas' mud, though, still holds their story. The soil tells tales. You step onto a Chinampa, the earth soft underfoot, rich with centuries of silt and sweat. Archaeologists have found Aztec tools here, obsidian blades. Wooden kows like the ones Tlacael wielded. You recall their weight. The blisters from weaving reeds. And see the same labor in this farmer's hands. Soil samples show traces of maize, amaranth, and marigolds. The same crops you harvested with Xochitl. Quirky tidbit, some Chinampas yield pre-Columbian seeds, still viable after 500 years. Sprouting plants. The Aztecs would recognize. You imagine Citlali's marigolds blooming again. Their golden petals, a defiant spark. The farmer offers you a cob. Its kernels small but sweet. And you bite into it, tasting the past. The Chinampas' fertility, once legendary. It is fading fertilizers and pesticides now prop them up, but their roots run deep. The canals are a fading map. You paddle through Xochimilco's waterways, narrower than Tenochtitlan's, clogged with algae and trash. Tourists in brightly painted trajineras, modern canoes snap photos, unaware of the caimans or currents you dodged. The canals once stretched across Lake Texcoco, a 100-mile network now. They're a fraction, surviving where developers haven't paved them over. You recall the Spanish brigantines, their cannons tearing through Chinampas, and see irony conquest drained the lake to erase the Aztecs. Yet these canals persist. Scholars debate whether Xochimilco's Chinampas can survive. Some say ecotourism could save them. Others argue pollution and overpopulation will bury them. You lean toward the latter, seeing the waters murk. But the farmer's stubbornness gives you hope. You pedal on. The canals ripple, a faint echo of Calchiotlicu's domain. The people carry the legacy. You see families tending Chinampas. Their Nahuatl names Cuauhtémoc, Nochitl linking them to the past. They're not just farmers, they're guardians of a culture nearly erased. You recall Citlali's strength, her altar to the lake goddess, and see it in a woman selling marigolds to tourists. Her smile warm but weary. These communities face challenges, land disputes, water shortages, the lure of city jobs, but they hold fast. Festivals like the Day of the Dead echo Aztec rituals, with cempasúchil flowers guiding souls. Just as you saw in Tenochtitlan's ceremonies, the spiritual thread endures. Though Tlaloc's altars are now Catholic crosses, you pose, watching a child scatter petals into the canal, her small hands like Citlali's daughters, and feel the past pulse softly, a lullaby in the modern din. The city hides traces too. You paddle towards central Mexico City, where the Zocalo, once Tenochtitlan's heart, covers the lake bed. Archaeologists, digging here, find Chinampa, remnants, reed mats, wooden stakes, even fish bones from the fertilizer you smelled. You recall the market at Tlatelolco, its chaos of maize and cacao, and know its foundations lie beneath modern streets. The Templo Mayor, partially excavated, looms nearby, its stones scarred like the Chinampas you saw under siege. Metro construction in the 1970s unearthed Aztec canals. Proof the lake's ghost haunts the city. You imagine Xochitl's canoe gleeding under skyscrapers, his maize feeding a new empire. The Chinampas' legacy is buried, but it's there, in the soil, the streets, the stubborn flow of water. The environmental cost is stark. You see Xochimilco's polluted canals, their fish scarce, their herons gone, the lakes draining, started by the Spanish to control floods, left a thirsty city sinking into its own clay. Mexico City's aquifer, once fed by Texcoco's springs, is depleting, causing subsidence buildings tilt. Streets crack. You recall the freshwater channels, the delicate balance Tlacael maintained, and see how conquest broke it. Modern Chinampas struggle with salty water, echoing the blights Nochital fought. Environmentalists push for restoration. But progress is slow money, and politics clog the effort like silt in a canal. You paddle through murk, your hands cold, and feel the lake's loss. A quiet ache for a paradise paved over. The cultural revival is fragile but real. You hear Nahuatl spoken softly, taught in schools, zung in markets, chinampa, and spear urban farming projects. Their techniques studied for sustainability. You recall the Three Sisters maize, beans, squash, and see them in community gardens. A nod to Aztec ingenuity. Artists paint chinampas. Poets weave them into verse, keeping the story alive. You pass a mural of Chalchiuhtlicue, her waters flowing across a concrete wall, and smile. The gods haven't left, they've adapted. Like the farmers, the legacy isn't grand, it's in small acts. Like the marigold you hold, its scent sharp and familiar. You paddle on, the canal narrowing, the city's lights bright but distant, lulling you with the promise of roots that endure. The toll on the past was brutal. You think of Xochitl's gaunt face, Sitli's lost children, the Chinampas burned or abandoned. Conquest and disease killed millions, erasing a world you've lived through its tools. Rituals, markets, yet the survivors' descendants farm Xochimilco, their hands echoing Tlacael's, their prayers a faint chant of Sentiotl. You see a farmer load his canoe, his maize bound for a local market, and feel their resilience. The Chinampas are a whisper now, but they're not silent. You drift through the quiet canal, the water cool, the stars soft above. Mexico City hums, unaware of the lake beneath. But you know its story, a dangerous paradise, buried but breathing, pulling you towards sleep with the gentle lap of memory. Section 15. You're drifting through a quiet canal in Xochimilco, the last bastion of the Chinampas. Under a sky, thick with stars that seem to pulse with the memory of Tenochtitlan. The air is soft, scented with damp earth and faint marigold. A whisper of the floating gardens that once fed an empire. You're about to float on a calm waterway, reflecting on the Aztec resilience that wove mud, reeds, and faith into a dangerous paradise. Your canoe glides gently. The waters ripple, a soothing hum, and the distant lights of Mexico City fade as you sink into a final reverie. This isn't a grand finale, it's a tender wind-down, a meditation on endurance and loss, perfect for drifting off as the Chinampa's story lulls you into dreams. Let's ease into this serene reflection. The lake's embrace, carrying you towards sleep. You lean back in your canoe, the wood creaking softly, and let the current guide you. The Chinampas around you are small, patched with maize and marigolds, tended by farmers who carry the blood of Xochitl and Citlali. Their resilience is a quiet miracle through siege, smallpox, and centuries of erasure. They've kept these gardens alive. You recall Xochitl's gaunt face under Spanish cannons, Citlali's calloused hands weaving reeds, and feel their strength in the plots you see now. Historians marvel at the Aztecs' ingenuity. Their Chinampas, yielding 4 harvests a year to feed 200. 0 souls. That legacy lingers, not in grand temples but in the mud. The seeds, the stubborn will to grow. You trail your hand in the water, cool and silky, and imagine their hands doing the same. A thread across time. The lake's memory is alive. You paddle past a Chinampa where a farmer hums, his voice low, planting squash under moonlight. The song's in Nahuatl, a language nearly silenced, but now taught in schools. Its cadence, like the chants you heard for Chalchiuhtlicue, The lake goddess still watches, her presence in the water's flow. The reeds rustle. You recall the ritual's copal smoke, marigold offerings, and see their echo in Xochimilco's festivals, where cempasúchil flowers guide souls on the Day of the Dead. Quirky tidbit. Some farmers still scatter maize into the canal. A nod to Tlaloc, though they pray to saints too. You smile, picturing Tlaloc sharing space with a cross. The gods adapting like the people. The canal narrows, the stars bright, and you feel the divine in the silence. A gentle pull toward rest. The tools endure. 2. You see the farmer's wooden hoe, a modern koa, digging rows as Tlacaille once did. Archaeologists find obsidian blades in Xochimilco's mud, their edges sharp after centuries, like the ones you wielded. You recall the blisters, the weight of stakes hammered into the lake bed, and marvel at the simplicity that built an empire. These tools are relics, but they're alive in the farmer's hands, carving new plots against pollution and urban sprawl. Scholars debate whether chinampas can survive. UNESCO's protection helps, but water shortages and concrete creep closer. You lean toward hope, seeing the farmer's steady hands, his maize sprouting despite the odds. You pedal on, the water's rhythm, a soft heartbeat, lulling you deeper into calm. The community binds it all. You hear laughter from a nearby chinampa, where families share tortillas under lanterns. Their voices warm. You recall the market at Tlatelolco, its chaos of bartering, and see its spirit here, farmers trading seeds. Stories. A strength. They face modern threats, land grabs. Tourism's weight, but they hold fast. Like Sitlali sharing a meal with neighbors. You imagine her smile, her daughter's small hands on an altar, and see them in the kids playing by the canal, their futures tied to this mud. The Aztecs' resilience wasn't just in chinampas, it was in people, their bonds enduring conquest and time. You drift closer, the warmth of their voices wrapping around you, a blanket of belonging that eases your mind. The loss is still there. You paddle past a chinampa, half eroded, its mud dissolving into the canal, a reminder of the lake drained by Spanish greed. You recall the siege, the burning plots, Xochitl's canoe fleeing with scraps of maize, Mexico City's sprawl buries most of Lake Texcoco, its skyscrapers blind to the canals beneath. The Chinampas' paradise lush, dangerous, divine is a whisper now, its marigolds blooming in cracks of concrete, yet the whisper persists. In Xochimilco's farmers, in murals of Chalcutlicu, in the maize you tasted, sweet and ancient, you feel the ache of what's gone, but also the pulse of what remains, a quiet defiance that soothes like a lullaby. You let your paddle rest, the canoe drifting freely. The stars reflect on the water, a mirror of the sky. The Aztecs saw, praying for rain, for harvests, for survival. You think of their gods Sentiotl, Tlaloc, Xochipilli, and their farmers, wielding kos, scattering ash, dancing in reeds. Their world was harsh. Danger, real caiman, locusts, conquest, but their resilience carved a paradise from mud. That spirit floats with you now, in the canal's gentle sway, the farmer's distant hum, the marigold's faint glow. You close your eyes, the water's lap, a soft caress, and feel the Chinampa's story settle into your bones, a tale of endurance that carries you toward dreams. The canal stretches on, its waters calm, its banks fading into shadow. Your breath slows, matching the lake's rhythm. Each inhale a memory of maize. Each exhale a release of loss. The Chinampas are here, In the mud, the stars, the hands that still plant, they're in you, too. A story whispered across centuries. Soothing as it fades, the farmer's song grows fainter, the stars softer, the water's embrace deeper. You're safe, floating on a lake that remembers. Its ripples a promise of rest. Let the chinampas hold you. Their resilience, a gentle tide, pulling you into a dream where marigolds bloom. Canoeist leader, and the world spins quietly, forever green. You're still in the canoe. The canal now, a velvet ribbon, under a sky so deep, it feels eternal. The water's whisper is all you hear. A soft, endless hum that wraps around you like a blanket. The chinampas are fading, their green edges blurring into dreams. But their warmth lingers. A quiet promise that resilience endures. You let your hands trail in the water, cool and smooth. Each ripple, carrying away the weight of the day. The stars above are gentle, their light a caress. And you feel the lake's embrace, holding you as it held Xochitl, Citlali. Their maize and marigolds, there's no rush. No danger now, just the slow drift of a world at rest. Your breath is steady, your eyes heavy, the canal rocking you like a cradle. The Chinampa's story is yours to keep. A seed planted deep, blooming in dreams, where the lake sings forever. Sleep comes softly, a wave that carries you home.